Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you all on this March 17th. Penguins fell 4-2 on Thursday night to the New York Rangers. Here to break that all down, plus preview the game on Saturdays. This is a home and home. Will be Nick Zararis of the Liberty Blue podcast and of Locked On Flames. It's coming up right after this drop.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at Analytical Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms. Joining me now is the man, the myth, the legend, one of my longtime friends from the hockey Twitter community. He is dressed in all green for St. Patrick's Day today. It is a very bad day to be a beer. Same thing for Saturday. Co-host of the Liberty Blue podcast for the New York Rangers with Andrew Choney, who is also a very dear friend, and co-host of Locked On Flames. Nick, how are we doing today, sir?
I'm great. The game was fun to be at last night. This is a great time of year. We've got March Madness on. We've got the Masters in a couple of weeks. We're in the stretch run for the playoffs for basketball and hockey. This is the best time of year to be a sports fan.
Yes. The fall is probably my favorite, but spring is right there with the madness. The NBA playoffs start in a month. NHL playoffs start a month from today, actually, April 17th. As you said, the Masters, everything is coming up here. And, obviously there was a game last night, Rangers 4, Penguins 2. They strike back after the Penguins took the first two at PPG Paints Arena. Interesting kind of game. The Rangers really came out firing those first 10 to 15 minutes, kind of similar to what we saw in game one of the playoff series last year, Nick. Penguins pushed back a bit, tied the game. Then, they tied the game again in the third period, and then the same usual suspects for the Penguins decided to be on the ice for another goal against, and they lost the game. But you were there. What were your main observations that you took away from this one?
The Penguins were not as tight in the neutral zone. There was a lot more space. You saw the Rangers generate a lot of rush opportunities. Even ones that didn't get to the net, they were able to get through the neutral zone with speed a lot cleaner in this game. The Penguins' forecheck wasn't as good, so the Rangers had time to kind of settle down in their defensive zone, regroup, and then get into those rush opportunities that they like. That's what the entire Rangers – that is what the Rangers are built upon, is getting the puck out of their zone quickly, going the other way with speed, odd man rushes, bank passes off the boards. The Penguins weren't as good as they were on Sunday. Granted, you play the same team twice in a 4-day span. You might identify things you can do a little bit better. But I thought the Rangers played maybe their best hockey game in at least a month, maybe since they played Seattle. The first game, Tarasenko was a Ranger. That was the last time the Rangers played that well for an entire game. Very encouraging for a team that's kind of been in a weird spot for, I'd say, a good 2-3 weeks now.
Yeah, it feels like the Rangers have just been, I don't know, bored is maybe the word, because it looks like they kind of have a playoff spot locked up at this point. They're 10 points clear of the Penguins, 13 points clear of the Panthers. Yeah, I mean, they're basically all but locked in at this point. But yeah, the Penguins really started slow and on their heels. Tristan Jarry, coming off one of his worst performances of the year, he gave them a shot in this game. I don't think any of the 3 goals that he allowed, just including the empty net, because for obvious reasons, I don't think any of those were his fault. If you look at the numbers at 5-on-5, the Rangers, they had the edge in scoring chances, high danger. Expected goals, though, it was kind of a coin flip. I think the Penguins, they turned it on in the second period for sure.
Yeah,
third period.
Definitely in the second.
A little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, definitely in the second. The Penguins were able to turn the heat up a little bit, where Shesterkin had to make a couple of really good saves in that second and down the stretch in that third period. That's the best game Igor's played in a while as well. It's very cliche, but the Rangers go as he goes. If he's not right, they're not as good as everybody else on that team is. If Shesterkin's not going, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been the Rangers when Hank was there, of course. Yeah. As far they would go as far as he would take them. You're just seeing that now with Igor. But yeah, I do think he made a couple of really nice saves in that period. Same thing with the third period. I also think at the same time the Penguins weren't testing him as much as they should have been. They weren't getting the traffic in front of them. The 2 goals that they scored, just beautiful set plays from Sidney Crosby. We'll get to him a little later on. But, for me, it was just, as you said, the Penguins weren't as good in the neutral zone. They were turning the puck over a little too much for my liking. That they gave up way too many odd man rushes. Just, making Jari come up with all these saves. Again, he played one of his finest performances of the season. I mean, he's struggled a lot, especially since he's come back from the injuries. It's obviously he's not 100%, but he was able to keep them in it. I was hoping they could squeeze a point out of that one, Nick, after they tied it halfway through the third period. I'm like, okay, if you can survive these next 10 minutes, see if you can get another one. Obviously, that's huge, but with how the Rangers were pushing for, honestly, most of the start of that third period, even though the Penguins tied it, it felt like it was only a matter of time before they would get scored on again. But, still, in a lot of areas, I think for the Penguins, it wasn't good enough, especially with how the playoff race is right now. And, I think a lot of people in this town are kind of just sick and tired of the same players just costing them games while the top players are just playing their butts off.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the Penguins all year, it's been the core 3, Gensel, and that's kind of really been dragging this team along. They've gotten
Jason Zucker, too.
Zucker's had a very nice bounce-back season, finally getting healthy for the first time in a few years. But the main core guys have dragged the Penguins all season. Sid is still as good as he's ever been. He's not as explosive or dynamic, and I know we're going to talk about him later. But he had that play where he sets up the goal, where he just pressures Miller into the mistake. That's just having a 10,000 IQ. Because if Miller just takes an extra second and he gets pressured into the corner, that puck doesn't end up in front of the net. He banks it off the glass or the boards, it doesn't end up in the back of the net. But because Sid is in the exact right spot at the exact right time, he forces it where the only pass Miller can make is on his backhand, and it's going to go in front of the net. And it's an amazing play by somebody who just doesn't need to do it. Like, in all honesty, the elite players in this league today, they don't really give you a lot on defense. You watch Kaprizov, Kucherov, the elite wingers in today's league, they don't really give you a ton defensively. Even Nathan McKinnon doesn't give you a lot defensively. But Sid made that play happen entirely on hockey IQ.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that after the commercial break. But yeah, when the Penguins really didn't have much going at that time, he was the one that led the charge. And honestly, he led the charge all night. Again, we'll get into that in a little bit. But I think for the, one of the first times I think I've seen against the Rangers, at least with Gallant and Sullivan, it felt like Sullivan was a little out-coached in this one just because, he keeps making the same mistakes with this lineup over and over again. I hate beating a dead horse, but with how good I know he is as a coach, and, we've talked about this as well, Nick, there are maybe about 5 to 6, 7 good to great coaches in the league. The rest are just, it's
interchangeable. Yeah.
You can interchange. You can fire someone else comes in. I do think Sullivan falls in that top 5, top 6, 7 range.
Yeah, for sure.
But I just don't understand, how can someone as smart as he is, and I know, you're from an outsider perspective here, how could someone be as smart as he is and not see these same 2 players just continuing to cost them game after game? It just reminds me of that Schultz-Johnson pairing from the bubble that he would continually put out there against the Canadians, and that's when the Canadians would score. And it almost feels like every time any of those 2 players were out there last night, especially with, P.O. Joseph had a cough up, but Carter had that terrible saucer pass. Dumoulin against Chris Kreider in front of the net. That goes as you would expect it to go.
Yeah.
And then a terrible between the legs pass from Dumoulin to spray Mika Zibanejad. Why is such a good coach loyal to a fault to these players? I just don't understand it.
I mean, my hypothesis in any of these situations is that they value their relationships too much. They won't put their guys in a bad situation because fostering that relationship matters. Even if the guy's not playing particularly well, he's still on the team. You can't freeze him out. You can't bring somebody else in, especially guys who are making a decent amount of money. You can't sit them. They got to play. And by trying to stick with them, reinforce their confidence, maybe you can get something out of them you wouldn't expect to get out of them by showing that confidence in them. They're people. You got to think of it like that, where you got to manage the relationships. And if a guy is struggling, having a hard time, he knows that. Those guys who are playing poorly, they know they're not playing well. but a coach sticking with a guy who's struggling is a way of trying to build that confidence back up, where even if a guy's not going to play well, he might be able to play a little bit better than he's playing. And that's ultimately your end goal for a struggling player, is to get a little bit more out of them. And that's why you stick with guys who are struggling, to reinforce the confidence that, hey, I know you're not playing that well, but I believe in you. The team believes in you. You'll figure this out. That would be my working theory. That's generally what I come back to when I wonder why guys who aren't that good continue to get run.
And it does make a little bit of sense with Carter, because they put him on the fourth line. They're starting to shelter him, but even with those sheltered minutes, he's still getting scored on every time he's out on the ice. I just don't think there's a proper deployment. Then with Dumoulin, you're putting him on the top pair with Chris Letang at times. We all know how good Letang is in this league. He can't be just, stapled to him. No, the entire time. And, thankfully he's up after this season. It's going to be the Carter problem. That's really the big one heading into the off season. But, it's frustrating to see the Core's efforts be for naught in a game where they could have gotten a point if some of the bad players just stop making bad plays. But a lot more to get to for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Coming up in the next segment, yes, we are going to discuss Sidney Crosby and why he continues to be one of the best players in the league, especially after how he played on Thursday night. But before we get to that, the NCAA tournament is heating up, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If I have my nope, that is not the right one. We have the beautiful FanDuel promo for you on YouTube, because new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. Again, that is bonus bets back if your first bet does not win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers and threes drained. My bracket right now, it's not looking, it's not busted, but I lost a couple of bad games yesterday. I'm looking at the Kennesaw State Xavier game. Xavier is one of my Final Four teams. I'm probably about to take a massive L with that. At least Michigan State is winning, though, for today, and hopefully VCU will be able to beat St. Mary's. So it is a bad time right now, Nick, with my bracket. But hey, Alabama won, so I'm not out of it just yet. Also, FanDuel lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss your chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NCAA. All right, we're back here in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Hunter Hodes. That is Nick Zararis. So, Nick, we were texting about this last night. You were there to see it. Sidney Crosby tried his absolute hardest to will the Penguins to at least a point in this game. It looked like they were maybe going to get one when they tied it up, thanks to Jake Gensel. But what a pass from Crosby. Just made a fool out of both, I think, Nikola and Adam Fox in that sequence, which is hard to do to Fox. I mean, he's one of the best defensemen in the league. And then before that, you touched on it about the 7-minute mark of today's show, made an absolute fool out of Keandre Miller. I think he thought Sid was not going to be there, but Sid has that hockey IQ. Obviously you grew up, you're the same age as me. I think there probably was a time where you were not the biggest fan of Sidney Crosby, as I think a lot of other.
It's begrudging respect. It's the same thing as Tom Brady. It's begrudging respect. You hate the guy's guts, but he's one of the best players to ever do it. Sid's on the Mount Rushmore of the history of the sport. He's the defining player of his era. There'll be people who want to make an argument for Ovechkin, who say Ovechkin's up there for the modern era. But when you're doing the Mount Rushmore of hockey, it's Gretzky, it's Howe, it's Orr, it's Crosby. Those are the four guys. That's your Mount Rushmore of the history of the sport. Sid, at this point, to still be playing at the level he's at, it's comparable to what LeBron's doing in the NBA. They came in that same first year, that 04-05 window. They're both still dominant forces when they're right. I mean, Sid's ability to just continue to fine-tune his game to the point where, there are weaknesses in his game. He's not as explosive as he used to be. He's not as physical as he used to be. But he's effectively the best grinder in the league because he's the smartest player in the league, and he's still got great hands. He doesn't have the explosiveness, but he's got the IQ and the hands to make almost every single play you would need out of a guy. And to the point where he's dragging that team along. Him, Gino, Letang, when you watch them, even even now, you see the flashes. It's not as frequent. It's not as often. But Sid makes plays that only a handful of guys in the entire sport can make. And he does it with a different toolbox now. He's not the dynamic, oh, I'm just going to go around these guys. I'm going to set this guy up. No, he's going to outwork you. He's going to out-leverage you. He's going to use body positioning where he doesn't even need to take a hit because he's going to take the puck away from you and get it to a more dangerous area of the ice. It's really hard to describe. Just to see guys reinvent their games as they get older and stand up to Father Time, where you see guys who can't do that, who once they lose that explosiveness, like think of a guy like PK Subban, who a couple really bad injuries, lost his explosiveness, and tried to still play like he was that same skater, and how quickly the wheels came off, especially those last 2 years in New Jersey, where he was effectively an all-offense guy, but couldn't really walk the blue line anymore, didn't have as good of a shot, and was really just kind of trying to play like he was still 2016 PK Subban. Whereas now you look at Sid, he's not going through people. It's not like 2011, 2012 pre-concussion Sid, but he's still one of the best players in the entire sport for me.
Yeah, and I think what he's doing this season is going very under the radar, underappreciated by a lot of people. I mean, 83 points, 68 games. Right now, he is on pace to hit 100 points as a 35-year-old player.
Yeah.
Not many in the sport have ever done that.
No.
And I think that just goes to show, how great it is. I think I saw one of our mutual followers on Twitter, I think it was Fitz, he said if there's a series on the line, he's taking Sid every time. And, obviously Connor McDavid is doing things that the sport has not seen for a long time this year, but I think people forget just how insane Crosby was when he was at his peak.
Yes.
Because I think even peak Sid takes out peak Connor. It's close, but I would probably say because, especially during that season when he got the concussion, he was on pace, Nick, for, I think, 60 goals that year. And over 125, 130 points. He was on pace to have what McDavid was going to have this season. So, I mean, I obviously know McDavid is going to win the Hart. That was locked up in November. No problem with that. He's the best player in the world. But do you think Sid should be getting, just based on the definition of the award, do you think he should be maybe getting more love as like a finalist or maybe finishing in the top 5 for it?
I think there's a real argument Sid's top 5. It's hard when you're trying to figure out who should be what 5. I think there's an argument. I said the other day, my 5 right now would be McDavid winning. I would have Matthew Tkachuk in there. I'd have Jason Robertson in there. I'd probably have Austin Matthews in there. And then if you wanted to put Sid 5, if you wanted to have Jack Hughes in the discussion as well, any of those guys I'd be fine with. It's McDavid's award. We all know this. It's just a matter of who's behind him. I think there's Sid's right there. Sid's effectively doing the same thing that Matthew Tkachuk is doing, where he's the best player on a team that's not really playing as good as everyone kind of thought it might be, doing everything he possibly can. I mean, like you said, 100 points at 35 years old. That's very rarefied air.
No, it is. And, I didn't think he was going to, hit 100 this year, but he has been something else. Again, those 2 setups that he had last night, you said it, he's thinking the game 3 to 4 steps ahead of everyone at this point. And I think, people around the league, I think, have just been taking him for granted. Like you see all these clips like, the latest Ovechkin goal. And I love it. I hope he does catch Wayne Gretzky. That will be awesome for the sport. You see this great Connor McDavid clip when he's blowing past someone. It's fine. But, we can still put clips of Sid out there just ho-humming, doing his thing like he's been doing.
Grinders aren't sexy, Hunter. You can't post grinder clips on Twitter. It's not going to play the same way that McDavid going through everybody, or Erik Karlsson or Ovechkin. The flashy stuff is always what's going to play. There are not 3-and-D compilations of NBA players. There is not a Kawhi Leonard defense compilation. That's not going to do numbers. You're always going to err on the side of offense and flashy plays. For the guys who genuinely love hockey, the way you and I do, the way a lot of people do, what Sid's doing is remarkable, and you just got to tip your cap. Like I said, it's a begrudging respect. You hate the dude for what he's done to my team. He's made me miserable on more than one occasion, but you can't hate that level of greatness at this point. It's the same thing with the people who are still hating on LeBron. Like, LeBron annoys me, but he's easily the best basketball player of his era, and at worst, he's the second best player ever.
No, I 100% agree with that. And, I was kind of the same with what you said with Brady. I couldn't stand him as a kid. As I got older, he kept winning. I'm like, all right, man. Like we all know how good you are. You destroyed the Steelers too many times in the playoffs for me to just keep hating you at this point.
Exactly.
It's the same kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, that was a great talk. That was a great talk, obviously, about Sid. I think we could also say the same for Malkin as well. He's having another point per game season. Chris Letang is really, found, shouldn't even say found the fountain of youth, because he's just been doing this his whole career. But, do you have a thought on just the core in general, continuing to play at such a high level, despite, the obvious aging curve?
The one thing I always tell my friends when I go to games with them, especially ones who don't go to a lot of hockey games, the ones you want to pay attention to are the guys who make every single thing they do look effortless. And one of the guys who's always held that for me is Letang. Whenever I've seen Letang play in person, his skating is so fluid. He never, ever looks down. He always knows where he wants to go with the puck. The only real hole in his game is occasionally he'll be a little too aggressive with his pinches, and his gap control isn't amazing. Other than that, when you're watching Letang work the line in the offensive zone, it is a treat. That dude, like Sid, has the IQ to know what to do so well in so many situations. Letang is just a treat to watch. That is the mold in which today's defensemen are cut out of. The Quinn Hughes, the Cale Makars, the Adam Foxes. Those guys are cut from the Letang mold of finesse, IQ, and positioning. Not elite speed, not elite size, just being smarter than everybody else and knowing what to do. Those guys are cut from the mold of a Letang. And because of success of guys like Letang, like Erik Karlsson, we are seeing this wave of newer defensemen who moonlight as forwards how good their puck skills are.
Yeah, and it's awesome that he's been doing that. Just another player, very underrated, very underappreciated.
For sure.
It's very unfortunate that he doesn't have a Norris Trophy to his name. I mean, I've always said when he was in his peak years, like especially 2012 to 2016, especially 2016 when Mike Sullivan took over, I have always said that there were not 5 defensemen in the league who are better than him, just because of how his play affects the team at both ends of the rink. So I'm glad that we have the Letang cult here on this show. All the Chris Letang hate I see all the time. It's just nuts. But that does it for this segment. Coming up to end the show, we're going to preview the Saturday's game and what the Penguins need to do to strike back and what the Rangers need to do to finish off this season series with a split. So it's coming up right after this commercial break. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Hunter Hodes. That is Nick Zararis. Excuse me. So, Nick, Saturday night, 8:15 start, I believe.
Yeah, because the Knicks play at 1, and they need the extra hour to change over the rink from basketball to hockey. That's why it's an 8, not a 7.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, always got to accommodate the Knicks. A good scheduling there, everybody. No, I'm just messing around. But 8:15 start, ABC, ESPN. I assume it's going to be their top team.
Yeah, Sean McDonough. Yeah, I saw the ESPN PR account tweeted today. It'll be them, and I think Emily Kaplan with Ferraro, and then PK, Chelios, and Messier in the studio. They tweeted it this morning.
Listening to Mark Messier talk is like watching your water.
It's nothing but cliches. He only speaks in cliches. It's very painful to listen. It was not great. I was watching the animated broadcast on Tuesday, not the Steve Levy, Mark Messier one. It's
brutal, but fourth and final meeting of between these two teams, probably for the rest of the season. I don't think they're going to play in the playoffs at all, unless
both would have to win in the round 1, and then you play in round 2. That's really the only way.
Round 1, yeah. If the Penguins get wild card 1 and the Rangers stay in the 2-3, it could happen. Obviously. Yeah, but probably unlikely, at least looking right now. But 8:15 start. I would assume Tristan Jarry will be in net again. Played very well on Thursday. Don't really think any other players will be coming in and out of the lineup for the Penguins, which is a little fortunate just because the same couple of players keep just dragging down the bus. From a Rangers perspective, Nick, what do you think they need to do to just, finish off this season series on a high note?
Exactly what they did on Thursday. Get the puck out of danger, make smart plays, and don't overthink it. whenever they've gotten into ruts and stretches of bad play, it's overpassing in the neutral zone. It's forcing one extra pass in the offensive zone. It's banking the puck off the glass as opposed to skating into open space. Last night was the best the Rangers have done at breaking out and getting to offense quickly in quite a long time. I haven't been home, obviously. I'm at one of my friends' houses, so I haven't had a chance to look on all three zones for the micro stats for the game from last night. But anecdotally, that's the best the Rangers defensemen have played in transition in maybe all year in a single game. And that's been the biggest problem for them all season is they can't get from defense to offense quickly enough. So with all that high-end forward talent, if you can't get to the offensive zone, it doesn't matter. If you're in your own end 45 seconds, a minute and a half, you're going to eventually wear down, where even if you don't concede a goal, you're going to take a penalty. You're going to end up in a situation where you're getting hemmed in for an extended period of time, and the guys that get out there get run down. For the Rangers in this game on Saturday, come out with the same enthusiasm and energy you did to start the game on Thursday. That's the best start the Rangers have had. That I know I've repeated it a couple times now that's the best the Rangers have played in quite a while. It's true that every facet of their game was really good on Thursday. Reiterate what you did on Thursday. I imagine the Penguins will be a little tighter in the neutral zone, so you're going to have to really work. You're probably going to have to work harder for offense. Those odd man rushes, like the bank pass that Zibanejad scored on, that's probably not going to be there. No. The Mott goal, that breakaway, that's probably not going to be there. So for the Rangers, it's going to be a matter of finding the details and sticking with what worked and adapting. The Penguins are one of the better teams in the league at adapting on the fly. So if those long passes aren't there, are you going to stubbornly pass into the defenseman like you did in games 3 and 4 of the first round series last year that have resulted in you conceding 2 games in a row? Or are you going to find the way that if those long passes aren't there, are your forwards going to be able to come back to your own zone, receive shorter passes, and then the forwards are going to be able to skate through the neutral zone and have to dump and chase and go get it? Or are you going to stubbornly do what doesn't work?
Yeah, I think that's obviously very good. From a Penguins perspective, obviously they got to do a much better job defending in front of their goaltender. They made Tristan Jarry make way too many high danger saves. 14 high danger saves was the number from the Thursday night's game. 14 too many, to say the least. But that has to be better. I also want to see the Penguins get back to their speed game on Sunday. The Penguins were skating circles around the Rangers, I thought, for those first 40 minutes. Granted, the Rangers also played the night before, so maybe they were a little more gas than the Penguins, but also the Penguins have played really bad on second half of back-to-back, so I'm not really sure. But I want to see the Penguins get back to that because usually, they have matched up well against the Rangers these last couple of years. They lost 3 or 4 in the regular season last year, but when they made the adjustments in the playoffs, you saw them do well, at least for the first half of it. Stuff happened after with the goaltending and some bad defensive collapses, but, I liked the matchup overall coming into the season. Same thing. Want to see them, get back to that. And you're right. I don't think that Carter Saucer pass to POJ, which leads to a Tyler Mott breakaway, is going to be there. I don't think Brian Dumoulin is going to go between the legs for another pass again. That would be pretty foolish, but that's what I'm really looking for. Also, got to get more traffic in front of Shesterkin. I imagine he will start. They honestly made it way too easy for him on Thursday night. He made some good saves. Yes, one of the 3 best goaltenders in hockey. I will always say it's like a 1A, 1B, 1C with Shesterkin, Vasilevsky, and Sorokin. I think Sorokin's definitely right up there, in my opinion, with how he's played. But you got to do a better job with him. You can't just be giving him clean lines of sight to every shot. He'll just glove those down, blocker them away like it's nothing. He was gobbling a lot of those up last night. He did still make some good saves, especially one of them was on Zucker, but want to see more traffic in front of them. And that's really what I'm looking for in that one. Obviously, a better start. You can't play the way you did in the first 10, 15 minutes. The Penguins were lucky, honestly, Nick, that they were not down 2 or 3 goals heading into the first intermission, that they did not play that well in that game. I don't expect this one to be nasty. Thursday night was pretty tame between these two teams. That's how I kind of want it for this one, to save everyone from eating each other alive. But
I was talking about this with Danny the other day. These are not mean teams. Like, these guys are not, there are not tough guys on either of these teams. But for whatever reason, when they get together, it turns into everybody wants to be a tough guy. It makes no sense.
it's weird, whoever it is, honestly,
Yeah.
Truba, Vince Trocheck, Evgeny Malkin going after him, but that's just, if you said it to me best, Nick, if your star player is not going over the edge sometimes, that's just,
it's limiting you. It limits you as a player. The one last thing I would say for you guys, if you want to win this game, you really got to try and get Crosby out there against Zibanejad, because that's been the one line the Penguins have had the last couple of years that's been able to kind of, whoever's playing on that other wing with Zibanejad, whether it be Kreider, whether it be Tarasenko, whether it be Kane, whoever it is, that's been the one counterbalance the Penguins have been able to have. Is Zibanejad's really good when he has the puck, but when it's time to get the puck back, for as good as he is defensively, he's not great in his own zone in terms of getting the puck back. So that would be my one suggestion for Mike Sullivan if he's listening. You want to get Crosby out there against Zibanejad, and then you probably are going to end up riding a lot of Malkin versus Trocheck, which you can live with, but I think that the more important matchup for sure for the Penguins is going to be limiting that Zibanejad line, because that was the best line in the game on Thursday.
Yeah, and usually I felt like in the playoff series that Sullivan would put the Crosby line out against the Zibanejad line, and he was taking Zibanejad's lunch.
Yeah,
I feel like.
It was like 60-30 in scoring chances when they matched up before Crosby got injured, and I think it was game 5. But yeah, before the injury in game 5, it was 60-30 in scoring chances. I want to say 55-45 in expected goals. It was not close.
Yeah, I will be curious to see how that takes place. And then lastly, just a small one for me. If anyone on this team wants to stop Chris Kreider, aka Jesus Christ, when he plays the Penguins, that would also be nice. He's turning into some Anders Lee, Jordan Eberle.
You forgot Brock Nelson. Come on now.
Especially Brock Nelson. Anytime, literally, anyone that goes on FanDuel, anytime goal scorer Chris Kreider on Saturday night, you will probably win free money.
That's what I had last night. I did Rangers anytime. I did Rangers money line, Kreider anytime goal scorer, Shesterkin 20 saves. Paid for 2 beers.
There you go. I mean, I felt like the Penguins were probably going to lose that game. I was hoping they would get a point out of it, but this one, playoff race is heating up a little more now.
Yeah.
Panthers just scored 9 goals, 7 of which were in the first period against the Canadiens.
Yeah.
I think that's the team you want to watch out for. A lot of these other teams are really not playing well, but Nick, this was a lot of fun. I will forgive you when you did the Mount Rushmore. Where was the Mario Lemieux reference on there? Shame on you.
Didn't play long enough, unfortunately, for consideration. He's got extenuating circumstances. He's in the next grouping. He's not on the Mount Rushmore, but he can have a memorial somewhere. He can be like Lincoln and have his own memorial somewhere. Okay, is that a fair consolation?
Oh, maybe a little bit. That's Nick's worst take he's ever had on this show, guys. Mario Lemieux is the greatest hockey player to ever play the game.
No. Until Connor McDavid retires 15 years from now, and then we can talk about that then. But until then.
Just giving you a hard time a little bit there, but no, I really appreciate you coming on.
Of course,
this has been a long time coming. And yeah, the Saturday's game should be a lot of fun. If you're heading out this weekend, obviously stay safe.
Have fun, stay safe. Yeah.
Yes, bad time to be a beer or any alcoholic beverage. Just be responsible, have fun, and yeah, this should be a lot of fun. But Nick, tell everyone where you are now, because some of your duties have changed since the last time you were on the show.
Oh, yeah, no. I co-hosting on Locked On Flames twice a week. Jess is actually going on vacation from Saturday until next Friday, so I'm riding solo all 5 days next week. I'll be hosting Locked On Flames all 5 days. Liberty Blue Podcast live every Monday, trying to get a little more content out, other conversation-style stuff. Hunter was on during the week. Danny Shirey was on during the week. So as the playoffs come into focus, talk a little bit more with teams that are looking towards the playoffs, get a better understanding of where they're at, and keep the people in the loop. That's always been the goal of any of my content. Make you a little bit smarter so that when it comes time for you to talk with your friends about whatever you're talking about, you have something good to say to them.
That's a perfect way of saying it, honestly. Yeah. And yes, please support your fellow content creators.
Yeah, man.
Everything helps here, especially with what we're doing. It is a ton of fun, but we don't get anywhere without your support. So go check Nick's stuff out. He does amazing stuff with those shows, and is also a great follow on social media if you are on Twitter. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll be back with another episode on Monday to recap this game against the Rangers and get you all set for that huge matchup against the Ottawa Senators before they go out to Colorado to play the Avalanche and Dallas to play the Stars. I'll talk to you all then. Have a great weekend.